Hello, passengers, and welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License with service to Firefly and space. We ask that you please fasten your headphones, secure your podcasting device, and remember, we may be slightly delayed on this flight, as light speed is not valid in this universe, but hey, at least you get free checked bags and some peanuts.
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License. My name is Geoff Kerbis, joined by Rich Inman and Max Singer. How you boys doing today?
Jeff, you might be excited to talk about Firefly, but I'm the one getting 1,000 hugs from 10,000 lightning bugs.
Oh, you would not believe your eyes because this is a podcast.
Oh my gosh. Well, gentlemen, this week we are going to be talking about a show that we've gotten a lot of requests for, Firefly, which if you are in the audience and wanting to watch this before you listen, it is on Disney+. But before we do so, Max, for our frequent flyers or maybe our first-time flyers, can you tell us a little bit more about what this podcast is all about?
Here at TV Pilot's License, we break down the pilots of some of TV's most famous, or in some cases, infamous shows. We learn more about how these shows came to be and were originally made, if they're effective pilot episodes and making us want to watch more if they can be made today. Go back and stream our old episodes from wherever you listen to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube and TikTok to see our smiling faces. And if it is your first time flying with us, then welcome aboard. Sorry, I know this is an audio media, but Rich has been mocking me the entire time I do my spiel.
It is not a uncommon thing for Rich to be like, I can't believe you have that memorized. I can't believe you have that memorized. And Rich is getting to that point where he's slowly learning it and trying to mock Max. But Rich,
this is my drag performance.
You might not have Max's intro memorized, but do you have your question of the week?
I do have my question of the week memorized, and I want to know, it's Firefly, baby. We're on a space pirate ship. Would you rather be on a space pirate ship or a regular pirate ship? And why? Go ahead.
I'm really glad you asked this.
Are you?
Yeah, because recently, I don't know what it is, but my social media accounts that I follow have decided that, you know what Jeff is super into? The ocean, and specifically sharks. And you know what? There is this one reel that gets served to me. I don't subscribe to this, and it's just these people on like a oil rig system out in the middle of the ocean, and they'll occasionally drop a sandwich into the ocean, and you just see so many things attack the sandwich, desperate for food, and it is so terrifying. So when I say that I am so on board the concept of being on a spaceship where I'll die instantly, I'm not going to get chewed or mauled to my knowledge.
That's true.
Maybe there is something out there, but that sounds so much better than being in ocean and two options. I either, drown or I get eaten by something that is very, very large.
See, Jeff, at first I thought you were going in the direction of when, a 6-year-old boy gets really obsessed with something and they make it their whole personality. I'm pretty into sharks right now. My entire internet's freaking sharks. And it took a real dark turn. I am going to go pirate ship because I have a rule in my life that I don't go anywhere where I can't naturally breathe. So that's no underwater and no outer space. If you invite me into outer space, I will decline. So I am taking pirate ship because also I went through the phase where my internet algorithms were really into sea shanty covers of pop songs. So I think I'll do well on the pirate ship.
Max goes on one virgin cruise and all of a sudden he's master of the sea.
Rich, what about yourself when you were thinking about this question?
I gotta go space pirate ship. I think because for a very similar reason, Jeff, I followed for a long time on Twitter the Russian deep sea fishing account. There's this guy who would post all these different extremely weird looking fish that he would find in the Arctic Circle oceans above Russia and stuff like that. And I'll just say, we don't want to know what's out there. What's in space? It's mostly nothing. So I can deal with nothing more than the craziest horrors you've ever seen pulled out of the ocean. So I'm going space pirate ship.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for that horrifying question of the week. Let's talk a little bit more about Firefly. And we're going to start off with a quick synopsis. 500 years in the future, a renegade crew aboard a small spacecraft tries to survive as they travel the unknown parts of the galaxy and evade warring factions as well as authority agents out to get them. Which, I'm going to just lay my cards on the table. That gives a lot of context that I wish this pilot had. But Max, can you tell us a little bit more about how Firefly got made?
Buddy, I will try. Today we're talking about the pilot of Firefly, titled Serenity,
Tudyk?
which originally aired on December 20th, 2002 on Fox, but the show premiered on September 20th, 2002. Max, explain how. And we're talking about the show's creator, Joss Whedon, a little bit.
Uh-oh.
So today we are covering our second Joss Whedon series. For more on Whedon's background, be sure to check out TVPL's episode on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The concept for Firefly stems from the novel The Killer Angels, chronicling the Battle of Gettysburg in the Civil War. Whedon was interested in the lives of those carrying on who fought on the losing side of war, and how they lived on the outskirts of civilization. Originally a stagecoach drama in the American West, Whedon wanted the series to be more character-driven and a grittier take on science fiction. The title Firefly was chosen for having a sound that implied both movement and power, but the word itself has no real relative significance, according to Whedon. Firefly landed at Fox as Gail Berman, a producer on Buffy and Angel at the WB, was now working as head of entertainment at Fox and was eager to bring on Whedon to create whatever he wanted to do as soon as possible. Once production began, though, things took a turn between Whedon and the network. Whedon was adamant the show be filmed and presented in widescreen, even shooting scenes with actors on the edge of frame so they could only be shown in widescreen.
Oh my God.
The show was not aired in widescreen.
Oh.
Executives rejected today's pilot we are discussing as too dour and not enough humor. Whedon was told on a Friday afternoon the network needed a completely new pilot concept by Monday or the show would be scrapped entirely. That would go on to become what is canonically episode 2 of the series, but aired as the pilot by Fox. Yes, today's episode, while the true pilot of Firefly, was not aired until after the show's cancellation, a button on a project Fox pulled the plug on before it even made it to its season finale. From the jump, the show was set up for failure at the network, being given a Friday night 8 p.m. time slot. Its episodes aired entirely out of order, frequent bumps out of broadcast for the MLB playoffs in 2002, and eventually dropped before November sweeps in favor of other more favorable programming. Yet the show found afterlife as a smash hit on DVD, and even a feature film in 2005 titled Serenity. So today, TVPL is piloting the Serenity and looking back on the true intended pilot of Firefly.
So you're telling me, Max, that Troy Glaus of the Anaheim Angels had a hand in canceling the show?
Absolutely. It is 100% the fault of Garrett Anderson that Firefly was canceled.
And for the people who don't know baseball as well, sure, sports. So let's talk about, before we talk about the idea of this pilot and this, unseen by network viewers unless they wanted to go back and watch the DVD, what are our thoughts on showing a show out of order, going to someone and saying, hey, this pilot, not it, try something else?
I, after having watched all 90 minutes of it, would also say this is not it. So,
yeah.
If I'm an executive, I'm like, why did you start the show in the middle of the show? So it is, and we'll very much get into it. But I mean, if you're a network executive, bear in mind it's 2002, but you're Fox. You have arguably the hottest shows on TV with 24 and Alias, right? Alias is Fox.
Ally
those are two.
Ally McBeal.
Ally McBeal, some of the hottest shows on TV at the time. Are you giving this a larger chance? Are you giving this a chance to prove itself?
Max, I mean, what about you?
I mean, this out of order airing joins the pantheon of such classics that TVPL has covered, which did this like Father of the Bride. It is brutal that Fox basically is like, man, we've got all these smash hits with 24, American Idol, obviously, at this point, and they looked at this blank check project they basically gave Whedon. Like, this is the best example of a blank check show I can think of.
Right.
And got their results back and said, what have we done?
Yeah.
I think airing anything out of order is a disservice. I also think it's wild of any showrunner to be like, my pilot is 2 hours long, air it. Like,
So,
there's like, there's such chutzpah to be like, I took your money and I went hard sci-fi 2 hours on the network that has Jack Bauer and Ryan Seacrest as its two biggest personalities.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question before we go too deep. And actually, you know what? I'm going to build up the suspense. I have a question that I'm going to ask you guys at the end of the pilot.
Oh, Jeff's also doing this episode out of order.
Yes, I am. And if you're listening in the audience, you have to stay till the end to hear the question.
That's right.
What if I just
We've disabled the skip ahead buttons
just to screw with everyone? But let's dive into this show. This show drops into the middle of a war and gives us nothing. Gives us absolutely no context other than Nathan Fillion is leading a troop of soldiers, and he happens to be religious because Christianity exists in this universe, and go. That is all the context you get.
Yeah.
We are on a wildly expensive soundstage with the nicest fake rocks the production team at Fox could build for this, and we are suddenly in trench warfare. I was told this was set hundreds of years in the future, yet we got people who I think are probably named like Brooklyn or something wearing old army helmets doing trench warfare like it's 1917.
Rich, what about you?
It's okay. So, like Max was saying, like this is very clearly like future Simi Valley, I guess. I don't really.
I have in my notes Nevada. Like we are in Nevada somewhere.
What this intro does, and I wrote this note in all caps. I took very few notes for this pilot because I know we were just going to talk about like the styling at certain points and mostly the style. This is not going to be a 90-minute breakdown of this whole pilot. This intro scene, for it being a warfare, it be like showcasing like space warfare and stuff like that, is sonically one of the most upsetting shows that we've covered so far. And I have this in my notes. There is almost no sound engineering for this entire show. The battle is really quiet. There's no music set behind it. The talking is very quiet. It's almost like no one mixed this properly, or if they ran out of money to ADR it or something like that. It's very confusing and very quiet.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, like, one of the things that this pilot, the beginning of this pilot does, is it expects you to be emotionally bought in on the idea of war. Right. And that's it. That is, and we do have to sort of go back in time and think what was happening around the early 2000s. And it was like, oh, war. War was happening in the early 2000s as well. But here's the problem. I don't give a shit about anyone I've met on screen. I have no reason to give a shit about anyone on screen. And then this show also falls into the trap of, what if we put flashing lights on something that currently exists and say it's the futuristic version of it? Because
but also it's trying to do like World War I imagery, but it's also got like steampunk elements, but it's also Civil War. There's just all of these violins basically playing Battle Hymn of the Republic in the background of shots. It's a lot happening tonally. It's a lot happening visually. There's just all of these elements combined into this big 90-minute soup of a pilot.
Right.
And like one really great example in this beginning scene is there's a character that we learn so much about their ambitions, and their name is Bendis. And when I say that within the first 3 minutes, we have this entire scene where Nathan Fillion is the hero. Nathan Fillion is leading the battalion and gives this really heartfelt speech about how you're now the sergeant. You can call in the airstrike, all this stuff. Bendis dies. And I'm sorry to tell you, he is the character we get the most context and exposition about in this entire pilot. And that is 3 minutes into a 90-minute episode of TV.
Yeah, and it's just like, and don't get me wrong, I am not, I am going to try to view this from a lens of someone who does enjoy sci-fi, because for me, someone with ADHD, I have not enjoyed the genre in general because it is a absolute just avalanche of proper nouns that mean nothing and are explained later, and it's all contextual, and there's not a lot of exposition, and I know that that's how the genre mainly works. However, scripts are better now. And I can get into a sci-fi show. I can get into something that has like paranormal elements or something like that. That exists in a different world because writers are now inclined to put more exposition into their scripts. This is just like really lacking context for me entirely. And I've seen great things that open with battlefield scenes and stuff like that. Saving Private Ryan. That one has context because we all know what the storming of Omaha Beach looked like and the significance of it and how many people died and stuff like that. And it is like, you're watching people die that you don't really have an emotional connection to yet because of the script, but you understand the greater context of what's happening.
I think for me, the big issue that I have with this cold open is that we then jump 6 years ahead, and the crew we meet, the way we spend the other, 80-ish minutes of this pilot have nothing to do with the cold open. We don't harken back to flashbacks of Nathan Fillion's, character of Mal's time in the war. We don't really get super into what the repercussions and ramifications of this battle scene are or how it's affected him as a protagonist. And so while I can see the vision of we want to build this world and we want to show you what's happening in the world at large, I don't know if it enhances the pilot because it's not time spent that affects what our A-plot of today's episode is.
So with that in mind, and now that we've talked about this cold open that can only be deemed unnecessary in the context of this entire pilot.
If you are a super fan who found this episode, I am sorry. Buckle up, partner.
No. I'm gonna say it right now. I'm going to just put it out there. I love sci-fi. I am the nerd. I am the dork of this podcast. And I am here to say, if you like Firefly, I have seen other episodes of this show. I understand why. This is just equivocally not good television.
Right. And for anyone who is joining because they are a fan of sci-fi or Firefly in general, because this is the reason we decided to do this pilot is because this show is on everyone's top 5 list of shows that have a what if of like, what if it got picked up? What if the studio put more attention behind it?
What if it hadn't been the baseball playoffs?
Yeah. What if the Angels weren't on an absolute heater that year? Darren Erstad, if you're listening, please come on the pod. Geoff, I'm most excited to hear about your takes on this because of the three of us, you are the most interested in nerdy stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
Not in a derogatory way,
Nope.
but like you do pay a lot more attention to more comic book or sci-fi driven shows that like may pop up on Amazon or Apple or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I want this episode to still cater to the people who do love this show. And maybe we can all just laugh at the pilot together in general.
And maybe you have an appreciation for that. Maybe you understand that there's this wild swing that was taken for this pilot that maybe wasn't the right direction, but it found its footing in subsequent episodes. But you can acknowledge that this is a weird way to start a series. And if you're that person, we appreciate you.
Yeah, and I want to just, the way I want to talk about this pilot, rather than going beat by beat, right? We're not going to talk about, what happened when they were in this particular scene. I want to talk about big themes that we see and big things that probably you as a Firefly fan may love, or maybe we loved, or maybe things that we just recognized. And the first thing that I want to talk about is how stacked this cast is. Now, us looking back 20 plus years in the future and saying, holy shit, they had so many stars that they were able to, get for their first major acting gig in many instances. And how did we like this cast of characters, not only as a cast, but also the characters themselves.
Well, I'll tell you right now, for anyone who is listening, please join us on YouTube, because you'll notice that my big brother Alan Tudyk is in this is a star in this pilot, and gaze upon him with your inset eyes, like I will. And I Gina Torres is absolutely terrific. Had a great career after this. Nathan Fillion obviously is like a sci-fi legend now. Alan Tudyk has like been in so many movies and like has, I'd argue, one of the like most envious like voiceover careers like on the planet right now. I mean, other than that, like I don't really see a lot of familiar faces in this.
Yeah, Summer Glau had a great sci-fi career after this show as well. Morena Baccarin also has been in a ton of stuff. Adam Baldwin, who probably you might even recognize from other television shows such as Chuck. Like
of the Baldwins?
Yeah, of the Baldwins. There's
I also didn't realize Christina Hendricks is in this
yes,
cast.
she is.
Yeah.
This show, I think one of the things that I leave this pilot, and I liked throughout this pilot, is we're slowly building our crew, right? We are very slowly. That is the purpose of this pilot episode. And Max, it is not our normal pulling a crew together. I know you're not as excited about it.
I know.
I think maybe Max, I mean, let's just ask. If we put our crew together in 5 minutes and you got to see what they're an expert in within those 5 minutes, would you have been a little bit more excited?
I think if I just got to see them... Okay, let's not even talk about the people who board the Serenity who joined the ensemble. Let's talk about the main crew of the Serenity. We kind of get glimpses into what they do. Like, it's implied that Alan Tudyk, Washburn, is the pilot. He's the tech guy. He's the guy helming things. Obviously, Nathan Fillion is Mal, is our captain. Kaylee is kind of like the tough as nails engine gal. But I don't get the chemistry super early on, and a lot of people just feel like very broadly painted archetypes in this.
Right.
A lot of the stuff with Mal, with Nathan Fillion, feels like they're trying to do their best Han Solo. From he's, this too cool for school. He's tough. He lives by a code. Alan Tudyk basically plays as Chewbacca, and I think is the only person in this pilot who gets some of that brevity, who adds some of that lightness that makes it feel like a good primetime show. Morena Baccarin is basically just woman in this ensemble. There's no real characteristics. She just dresses and undresses in very, very lovely robes throughout this pilot.
She's like a post-futuristic like space hooker, I guess. Like, and the way that they describe her functionality on the ship too is really upsetting. Where it's like, oh, some planets won't let you land unless you have like what do they call it? A companion, which means like, oh, they're only gonna let you go there if there's like someone, like a woman on board that they can fuck. Like, that is super weird.
I think though it's like everyone is like a one-line character. It's like Jade is the tough guy, Wash is, the goofy pilot. Like, everyone has these just broad stroke characterizations, and I never felt like I got to know anyone's intentions, their given circumstances, for a show that is as long as it is, for a 2-hour TV run originally. I don't leave here knowing a lot about people, and that's really tough to get me on board for the next one.
They almost like don't even have chemistry between Zoe and Wash. Like, it is for them being like hot romantic lovers. It feels very like, okay, you're in love, now go.
But they are horny. They are horny, though.
Max,
Alan
I'm
Tudyk,
so glad.
Alan Tudyk, sex machine
Absolutely.
of Firefly.
Runs in the family.
Let's be clear. For whatever this pilot is, one of the things is it is horny as hell. But it's really weird how it is horny.
Yeah,
right?
it's weird horny. It's weird sci-fi horny.
Like, you talked a little bit about Morena, right? And how her character of Inara just gets dressed and undressed. And there's like, oh, we have this we have this character walk in on her as she undresses. Shepherd Book, right? Oh, there's a pastor on the Firefly. Like,
shout out to Rod Glass, Barney Miller legend in the house.
like, and I just sort of, there is something when we do pilots and they're horny, there's sometimes where it's like a little bit wacky horny, where we're like, you know what, that was great. Like, I enjoyed how horny this pilot was. I felt dirty in moments of this pilot where I was just like, we didn't need a gratuitous sex scene in the middle of the episode where then a guy was talking about how, she shortened his time with her afterwards. We did not need, there were moments in this pilot where I was just like, you know what this episode needed? 1, context. 2, exposition. And 3, a good editor. Like a great editor to say,
is
holy,
good God.
Go for it, Rich.
Whatever is the opposite of an Emmy should go to this editor, because holy Christ. I mean, maybe you didn't have a lot to work with. And Joss Whedon was like, make it 90 minutes. and what you really wanted to do was make it a 30-minute comedy. But it is very, I'm dropping my weekly Severance reference. Sex in this script is strange but important. Or is that like, was that the line from Severance? Like
the work is mysterious and important.
The work is mysterious and important. That's it. Okay. Sex is mysterious and important somehow in this script. It is, it is just like the chemistry is just off on all levels.
So we talk about this cast. There's 2 characters that we really haven't talked about as part of our main crew. That's Sean Mars, character of Simon, as well as Summer Glau's character of River, who are just sort of inserted in this final half of the pilot. And it just seems like they're there. They're important. They're
mysterious and important.
Simon gives a lot of context about who he is, but then we're sort of just left with this River of like, she's important to this evil empire, the Alliance, that we're very worried about, but we have no understanding of why. And I mean, I say this as a nerd. One of the most important things you can do as a nerd is make sure that people don't get lost in the things that you're talking about.
Bam.
Right? And one of the first things that this pilot does is, I want to transition this into talking about this show in action, but is we have this big scene where they're heisting, and then they start using terms that we, the audience, are supposed to figure out what they mean. Like bunny hop was used in this pilot without any context, and if you were not watching the screen and you heard someone say that, what the fuck are they talking about? But it brings me to an important part of this. The way that this show is advertised is as a space western drama. Now, a critical part of any drama is you have to have those standoffs. You have to have that action, gunfights, all of those things. We really get 4 scenes of that sort throughout this pilot. And as a critical part of a drama, how do you think this pilot does in the action scenes it has?
I wanted it to be Tombstone levels
Yes.
of OK Corral shootouts. And I think instead you get a lot of grandstanding and explanations. Like when we do get these big shootouts, when we do get hostages taken, standoff scenes, when we get to blasted, it's a lot of talking. And I think that the weak part of this is that Whedon tends to over-explain something instead of just getting to the blasting, which is what we all want to see. And if this show just trusted its instincts to get to the action, I think there could be some fun sequences, but it's a lot of build up for a very quick payoff, or in some sequences. There are times in this pilot where we explain an entire large concept, such as the Reavers.
Yes.
And then they're like, and their ship passed by. We're okay for now. And it's like, then why did you spend so much time talking about them?
Because they come back later, Max, and we have to be worried about the consequences.
But I don't know that yet.
Yeah, I mean they feel like I feel like they set up the Reavers part as like a real pirate ship where it's like, oh, that's Blackbeard's crew kind of thing, and like that is how they do it. Because the description of the episode said space western, I immediately started to look. For anyone saying like we're being too negative on the show, really tried to give it the old college try. And I even tried to envision certain scenes where it's a young Clint Eastwood in Nathan Fillion's role, where it was like they're doing the showdown, they're doing the negotiation for the stuff they stole, like with the shady guy and the weird bowler hat and stuff like that. I really did try to make this a Western in my mind. And for anyone saying that like, oh yeah, it's like a big leap, you know what also was a space Western? Fucking Star Wars. Star Wars was a space Western. It's half Western, half samurai movie. That's what Star Wars is.
And it's interesting you bring that up, Rich, because right around this time, guess what's coming out? The prequel series to Star
24.
Wars.
Oh, right.
So Phantom Menace, right? Like all of those are coming out at this time, and you have to sort of go into that mindset of comparing 1-to-1 of like, oh, we're gonna make a space western that Fox will own as IP. Like, what fun, and how much money are we gonna make? And then you get this.
Yeah, but also, I mean, and I will say, significantly different budgets.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, like night and day. It's not even close.
A lot less JarJar Binks too, and I'm here to say,
Binks.
very
but
disappointed.
Also, do you know how much writing costs? If you're
I wish though that Firefly as a whole was willing to lean in more to those like spaghetti western elements, whereas I think it gets a little too bogged down in the hard sci-fi, because there are moments with Mao playing, the lawman, the voice of reason character, where it is convincing. He gets some quick one-liners. He's good with the quick draw. When he just walks aboard and like blasts someone like, out of nowhere. Those moments are fun. You mentioned the man with the fancy bowler hat. He says to him, "Maybe I'm not a fancy gentleman like you with your very fine hat." That's a delightful line. It makes no sense. I want 1,000 more lines like, "Maybe I'm not a fancy gentleman like you with your very fine hat," and less explanation of space.
He only gets 3 of those lines the whole episode.
The best version of Nathan Fillion is the smarmy version of Nathan Fillion, where he's charming, where he is allowed to be like, a little bit of a ham. And this pilot decides to be the saddest version of this show that it could possibly be. Like I have in my notes, like, we're going to talk about favorite characters because we have an in-flight question. But one of my bright spots on this episode was Kaylee Fry, that character played by Jewel Stady. And it's because she's positive and she's happy. And, she's trying to, and like, sure, the idea of this situation of, oh, we're in a post-war war world where like, hey, there's few resources and it's tough and it's hard and it's gritty. Cool. Even in fucking Tombstone, they were able to get drunk and have fun,
which you could also watch on Disney Plus.
Yes. And that's the part of me that's sort of like, if you hear Joss Whedon and this is right after Buffy the Vampire Slayer and his time on Buffy the Vampire Slayer is over, you're expecting a lot more humor. And guess what we got? Not that much of it. And I mean, we've been talking about this pilot for a bit. And I guess one of the things that I have on my mind, since we aren't really talking about plot, or we're not talking about the pilot, its structure itself as a whole, is, I mean, let's talk about the ending of this pilot. Because I'm going to give it credit. This pilot does tie a lot of the knots that it puts out there. And I have to give it credit on that sense. But as far as the knots that it ties, but also leaves loose ends to convince you to watch that other episode, what do you think of those? Do you think that's enough to say, yeah, for the audience, hypothetically, that never saw this on network TV, are they going to tune into that next episode?
I personally, this episode did bring me back around, because at a certain point they do get to the blasting. There is like the sabotage, like the guy who was knocked out regains consciousness and goes back to trying to be the bad guy, and like, you do get some exciting elements there. And I will say, like, it's not necessarily the most compelling ending,
Sure.
but it did bring me around to a point where I was really battling looking at my phone during the whole episode, and that's that's as good of a thing as any. Like, I want them to bring it back around. Like, I want to be in this pilot.
I think that the character of River is an interesting choice for a MacGuffin, in
Sure.
that this person, this girl who is described as supernatural and of value to the universe as a whole, is being chased down by this evil entity. And like, we literally meet her frozen in a box. There is a secret item that serves as a MacGuffin, and then that evolves into a human being. And we know that a lot of the action is probably going to be about people chasing the ship to try to get to this character, and what does this character mean. That is interesting. I think that having human life as your MacGuffin is going to create some high stakes.
Can you explain what a MacGuffin is too?
Yeah, it's basically any sort of object or person whose like existence is the driving action for the plot. So for examples for the audience, the ring in Lord of the Rings, Private Ryan and Saving Private Ryan. It's like that. Sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't, but like discussing them, the Infinity Stones in the Avengers movies, they're these objects that control the action, that like drive the story forward. And that's interesting. But we don't also know a ton about the people behind them.
Yep.
I just think that there is something that could have been whittled down in here that is just lost in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with you. This pilot it leaves on a note that we've seen before in a lot of shows before this time, right? The idea of, now that we have this crew of people that are together willingly or unwillingly, let's see the adventures they go through while going against this mysterious force in a world that is unknown. And maybe we'll have a laugh or two, and maybe a few fights along the way to know. Well, gentlemen, that's our time discussing this pilot. I want to talk about things that we love, because let's be honest, our conversation wasn't the brightest. And for folks who are here for the first time, we've talked about sci-fi before. We've talked about sci-fi in a loving way before. So if you think, oh, these are some snobs, I'll just tell you, we've talked about 911, which is not a sci-fi show, as if it is cinema, as if it is the greatest thing to ever happen. And boy, oh boy, are we going to talk about 911 Nashville when that comes out? Hell yeah, we are. But I want to ask you.
We'll find shit to love, I promise.
Oh, we can find things to love, and that's why I love this segment, because I want to talk about things that we loved about this pilot, things that we want to bring a little bit more shine that maybe did work. That we were like, you know what? We have something here. And Max, I want to hear what you loved.
Horses in space. I love the things that Joss Whedon chooses to still exist in their normal form 500 years into a dystopian future. I love that everyone still just rides horses. I love that the character of Jane has his room covered in cut-out pinup girl pictures. I love when the show takes simple things and allows them to exist in dystopian sci-fi future. But every single time they're on horseback, on other moons, on other planets, I giggled so hard to myself. The horses are the MVP of Firefly.
Take me to the horse planet.
Rich, what about yourself?
So I gotta go with okay. So I got two things I really loved. Number one, Nathan, like the few but powerful Nathan Fillion quips are solid. "We're just too pretty to let God for God to let us die."
Yeah.
is one of the only redeeming moments in the entire opening.
That
sequence.
is an emo band lyric from 2005 if I ever heard one.
Yeah, that's a Fall Out Boy song for sure. If anyone gets nosy, shoot them politely. And then didn't she shoot you one time? Everyone's making a fuss. Perfect lines. Second, my older brother Alan Tudyk. He for him being the quote unquote Chewie of the show, I think he's closer to Harrison Ford in his attitude and feels the most like he's actually part of this environment. He's also very good at his job, which is something you don't see a lot of in this pilot. There's a lot of people kind of like making pretty large screw ups, or just like getting lucky, and that's how they get out of things. He clearly knows how to drive the hell out of that spaceship. So I think Alan Tudyk like rises as a star in this.
Oh yeah, the maneuver behind the crazy Ivan, Alan Tudyk.
Oh yeah.
So 2 moments that I love in this. One, there's a Nathan Fillion scene or a choice that they made of Nathan Fillion's character saying, "Oh, Kaylee's dead." And we get this slow motion, and we get all of the people cracking up, being like,
Fuck,
"You're
that was so
fucking
funny."
nuts." And I was like, that's a great, like, if that's the tone that this show approaches, and guess what? Spoiler alert, it does in future episodes, right? A+. Like that, I want more of that. And then I really liked the OK Corral shootout that we got on Planet Whitehall. I thought that was we need more
Planet
of that.
Horse.
We need more, woman on a horse saying, "Oh, I don't like giving away my money," and then shootout and sniper. Like, "Oh, is that your best shooter?" Like that, I was like, you know what? Like this. This is really fun. And I think that that's why a lot of people have fallen in love with the show or want more of it, because it is that action with smarminess, with jokes, a little bit in your face, a little bit of like the best version of Joss Whedon, which is, just let's be funny, let's be a little bit in your face, and let's be smarmy. We talked a lot about wait a minute moments already. I don't think it does us any good to talk about more wait a minute moments in this instance.
Unless
You'd be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I actually still have more stuff that we somehow have not covered.
So, Rich, I'm gonna let you get to pick one.
Okay.
What is your additional wait a minute moment?
For me, just overall, the way they talk is checking too many boxes of things that you expect the audience to follow along with. There's Western slang, there is space lingo, there is army talk, like military language, and also Chinese. And the Chinese aspect of it, I don't really have like an issue with. Like, I think it's pretty clever the way that they force people into seeing a world in which Chinese becomes the global language of Earth, and not too far off. And I could see that being like the case. And when you're writing this in 1999 or 2000 or whenever he wrote this, but pick a lane. It is like it was like watching Dairy Girls. I had to watch this with subtitles on, otherwise I was not going to be able to follow it.
And we love Dairy Girls.
And
Max, what about
Girls.
you?
All right, listen up, dorks. I don't care. I don't
Here
care.
goes Max's jock corner. Yeah, bully him, Max. Do it.
I don't care that space is a vacuum devoid of sound. It is
Thank
a
you.
bad TV choice
Yes.
to
Thank
have
you so much.
no background noise for extended periods of time when you are making a pilot episode of TV.
It's not Gravity.
For a show about space scavengers who spend extended periods breaking into the hulls of ships and satellites, to have no background noise whatsoever for minutes at a time
Yep.
is just awful TV.
It's agonizing.
It is so confusing because I am dumb and I thought something was wrong with my soundbar when I first started watching this pilot, and the sound cut out for 2 minutes straight.
But, like, here's the funny part, Max. By making that choice, they also are sort of saying in this universe there is a steel guitar that just randomly plays at certain times when you're just walking around space, and that's the problem with it. Like, you can't just randomly be like, oh, steel guitar in this scene and not in this scene. Is God a steel guitar? Is that what you're saying, Joss Whedon? Tell me
5 minutes
more.
into this pilot, Joss Whedon did this bold choice of removing all audio effects just to filter out all the people like me who were not going to be able to get past it and leave the show to the true sci-fi heads.
There's almost none. I actually was going to ask you, Max, because I know you did the research for this episode. Like, is there a chance that some of the sound got eliminated by Disney Plus because of copyright law? I don't think that's the case.
The only aesthetic choice that I think we kind of briefly hit on is that they wanted to use handy cams to create some like quick found footage shots. So there's a lot of different like filming elements where it's like, we want to go widescreen, we want to go cinematic, but we also want to create like quick little shaky cam moments. Like, there's a lot of visual stuff there.
Yeah.
But I literally think audio wise, this was them saying there's no sound in space, so we're not going to do it.
It's like a student film. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts have been very present, so I'm going to go to our in-flight question because we have an in-flight question, one more question for you gentlemen, and our in-flight question comes from Instagram from Jenny May. All of the characters are fantastic, but why was Jane everyone's favorite? So instead, I'm going to ask, gentlemen, if
Jane, did you submit this question?
So I'm going to ask, was Jane your favorite character? If so, why? If not, who was your favorite character that you were introduced to in the pilot of Firefly?
Well, you know mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
And Alan Tudyk wins again. Max, what about yourself?
I mean, listen, I would probably say that Wash is my favorite as well. But I will say, with Jane, he is one of the few characters that we get a little peek behind the curtain at the very end of this episode when Mal asks him, like, how much money were you offered to sell me out?
Yeah.
And if you were offered more, would you do it? And it's left ambiguous because now there's a little bit of like a cat and mouse or a tension within the crew. There's a thing that could break this team apart, but they have to learn to coexist. And that's interesting. I wish I knew more about the person than just, I am big, I shoot guns, I have pinup girls on my wall.
Yeah.
But there is a fun little tease at the end of there's more than meets the eye to this person. But yeah, I think just having a big lug on your crew is always a nice little touch. We love them. Every crew needs a muscle guy. This is crew building 101. You need the muscle, and Jade is the muscle.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with you, Max, in the idea that last scene of Jane had me, and also him just being like, can I shoot him? Can I shoot him? Like, that constant sort of commentary is necessary. You need the big dope. Like, I'm going to talk about D&D later, very specifically for a good reason, but like every D&D crew needs like that Goliath or like that person that is just like the lug or like the idiot. And this is that idiot, or at least to our knowledge based off of the pilot. Well, thank you so much for that question, Jenny. We'll talk a little bit more about how to submit those at the end of the episode, but let's talk a little bit about the history of the show. So there was one season of the show and 11 episodes of the show aired, although 14 were produced. This is one of those episodes that was never aired on Fox. As Max mentioned, due to strong DVD sales, Joss Whedon was actually able to make a movie based off of this IP called Serenity. In addition, there was a series of comic books as well as 2 role-playing games based off of Firefly as well. This show falls into that fun category, as we said, of shows that were shown out of order, which always is going to lead to success. Ton of podcasts for this show. I don't even want to talk about all of them because there's a ton of them. Con Man, which stars Alan Tudyk, is loosely based off of the concept of the show and Alan's experience going to all of the conventions, which is...
Oh, that's funny.
Would highly recommend watching that if you have not. It's just him being the jerk version of himself because he's literally the sweetest man in the world. But I do want to talk about something, and that is awards. 14 nominations for the show and 9 wins. That includes 2 Saturn Awards as well as a Primetime Emmy for visual effects for this show. The rest of them were all sci-fi awards. And there's also one other thing that I do want to mention, and that was the influence of this show, or what this show was influenced by. And one of the things that are pointed to is there's this great comic book series that got turned into a dropout D&D campaign called Starstruck Odyssey. That is a space western that everyone, if you love Firefly, holy shit, are you gonna love Starstruck Odyssey? If you watch this and were like, what the fuck was that? Then you're gonna also love Starstruck Odyssey. So I'm highly recommend checking that out. You can actually watch the first episode for free on YouTube. And if you have any interest, you can find the rest of that series on Dropout. And that is hosted by Brennan Lee Mulligan, whose mom actually wrote the comic book series herself. So very, very cool stuff.
Wait, so she's a comic book author, and his dad's a stand-up comedian?
Yes.
What a wild family.
One of the coolest, talk about a dream guest. Brennan Lee Mulligan, if you somehow, by the grace of God, hear this, I will have you on here to talk about we will talk about Firefly again if you want.
I'll just talk about leftist politics with him all night.
Yeah, exactly. But, Rich, it is time for your game of the week.
I just want to say now I really want to watch Con Man because what a funny Ricky Gervais ass concept. I really love that. Okay, so I have a little bit of sci-fi TV trivia for you guys, a little bit about the history of sci-fi and American TV. The first popular sci-fi TV series in the U.S. was called Captain Video and his Video Rangers, debuting in 1949. In 1949, what was the number 1 TV show based on ratings? Was it A, Howdy Doody, B, The Milton Berle Show, C, The Ed Sullivan Show, D, Ronald Reagan's Cavalcade of Stars?
Ooh, I'm going to go D, Ronald Reagan's Cavalcade of Stars.
I'm going to go D as well, because I always do this. I always do something different than Max, and he gets it right.
Well, you're both wrong. I made up Ronald Reagan's Cavalcade of Stars.
Okay, what's he doing? Get him on the horn. Let's make it.
Oh, my God.
It was the Milton Berle Show, which, Jeff, you're going to shit your pants at this, got an 80 share.
That's insane.
80 share.
That's genuinely, for the audience.
Uncle Milty, baby. Uncle Milty.
Oh, my God.
Second question and final question. The Twilight Zone, the original, which ran for 5 seasons between 1959 and 1964, was arguably one of the most influential science fiction series of all time, described as the cruel indifference and implacability of fate and the irony of poetic justice, were a career launching point for all but which of these actors? So which of these actors was not on the original Twilight Zone? A, Burt Reynolds, B, Ron Howard, C, Carol Burnett, D, Jane Fonda.
B, Ron Howard. This is a shot in the dark.
I'm going to say Burt Reynolds.
It was D, Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda was
interesting.
the only one. And boy, is the list of people who got their start on Twilight Zone
I can only
batshit
imagine.
crazy. It is like everybody that you could possibly think of from the 60s and 70s on TV.
That and the Love Boat. Both ships.
The Twilight Zone.
Oh, my God. Well, Rich, thank you so much for that game of the week. Gentlemen, as this flight comes to a land, I have 2 questions for you. And they're a little bit different than what we normally do, because I think you both have revealed your cards. So I am asking you to put on your producer hats instead. Ooh. And the first question is, would you, based off of watching this pilot, pull a David Zaslav and say, we're just canceling the show altogether and taking the tax loss? Or would you, as the second option, give the pilot that aired on TV a shot based off of what you saw? And those are the only 2 questions that I'm going to give you. There's no, do you think this could exist today? There's none of that. There's none, should it get another renewal? Because, y'all, the audience heard how we talked, and we are a TV podcast, so I want you to put on those producer hats.
Well, okay, so my thought is that I want to know what people love about the show so much, because clearly it's not because of the unreleased pilot that we watched. That was not it. That wasn't it. I'm sorry. I would love to see what they did with the rest of this show. I am actually saying I want to watch more of this because I'm like, what does everyone see in this? I am not giving anything a green light based on the pilot that I watched. That was boy, that was a hot dumpster fire of a pilot. Just a absolute mess of a script and a mess of an editing job. But I think I do believe that answer would change if I watched the rest of it. I would give it one more episode. I'd give it one more episode, and then I'm like, all right, throw it on there. And and I probably wouldn't bring it back either, right? From what I've seen.
Max, what about yourself?
Yeah, if I'm an executive in 2002 and I've given this hot young writer and showrunner a blank check to make a hit for my network to attract a young viewing audience, and he brought me this, I would probably also say go back to the drawing board and have something new by Monday.
Yep.
I would never say we're scrapping something entirely. I would never pull the Zaslav and just say we're burying it for tax purposes. But kind of like Rich, Fox gave Whedon the ultimatum and said, come back with something different on Monday. And he did. And they aired it. And while, it couldn't compete with the likes of Benji Molina and the 2002 Anaheim Angels.
Fuck yeah, dog.
There is something that second go-around had that built a following. And there's something that attempt number 2 has to have that makes people so passionate about this show. I do not think the version we watch today is an effective pilot. I do not think it is compelling in terms of setting up a world or making me want to watch more. But I want to know what Whedon came back with on Monday that made people so passionate about Firefly, and I would be willing to watch the second episode.
So let me finish this off. And I am going to, when Leonardo DiCaprio points at the screen, I'm not going to give this a TV pilot's license. I am not allowing this to be the TV pilot that airs on TV. Very similar to the executives at Fox. I think that we're all in agreement that if we could send this podcast episode back in time to Joss Whedon and say, use this as show notes and make some edits, this might have seen air because there were components that were missing in this pilot that we've seen so many great pilots that it just did not have. And I also want to, I implore you both to actually watch the actual pilot that showed on air. I implore you both because it is good, and I think you will both see what the audience and what hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, fell in love with.
Sure.
And then as far as, there's so much stuff. There's so much sci-fi now. There's too much sci-fi even for me, and I love sci-fi. And this, I don't think this would be successful right now because it is not unique. But I also think that this show is something truly special in the idea that it got a lot of actors right before they all sort of hit their mark. And it's really fun to sort of look back and say, that's really cool that they were all there and they were all a part of this. And they all are still, according to Alan Tudyk, very good friends, which is awesome. So,
although being friends with Joss Whedon right now has its own complications.
Yeah, we can talk about that on another different podcast. But gentlemen, that is our flight. But before we go, I want to make sure that folks can find you wherever you are. So, Rich, where can folks find you?
You can find me sitting co-pilot with my big brother, Alan Tudyk. And you can also find me on Instagram at Damn That's Rich. You can find original sketch comedy for Max and myself at Dadwagon Comedy.
Max?
You can catch me eating one strawberry very sensually and on all things social media at Maxwell Singh.
Beautiful.
And you can find me riding a space horse. It's not a regular horse. It's a horse in space. But if you are looking for me on social media, you can find me at Run Jeff Run. If you're looking for the TV Pilot's License, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also watch our smiling faces on YouTube. And you can also follow us on any available social media platform. If you have a question about the show or for our next episode, you can email us at tvpilotslicense.com. You can go to tvpilotslicense.com just to leave us an in-flight question, or you can leave us a voicemail, or if you're shy, leave us a text at 213-290-1713. Please make sure to rate, review, subscribe. It really helps the podcast as we continue. We are on 2+ years of this, and every review counts, so it is appreciated, and thank you in advance for becoming a frequent flyer. But with that said, and the plane landed and the seatbelt sign off, we look forward to flying the bright skies of the TV world with you soon. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your fingers on the dial.
Horse
Some
in
people call me
space.
the space cowboy.